Prime Minister Scott Morrison and Joe Biden have finally spoken 3 weeks after the fall of Kabul to the Taliban. Biden has been claiming his Afghan exit is a victory.
The extraordinary success of this mission was due to the incredible skill, bravery, and selfless courage of the United States military and our diplomats and intelligence professionals.
It's absurd. This was no victory. Not only has the Biden administration bungled the withdrawal, but they're actually now talking about giving the Taliban aid.
You say we're going to work with the Taliban. Does that include the prospect of giving them aid?
Well, first of all, we do believe that there is an important dimension of humanitarian assistance that should go directly to the people of Afghanistan. They need help with respect to health and food aid and other forms of subsistence, and we do intend to continue that. Secondly, when it comes to our economic and development assistance relationship with the Taliban, that will be about the Taliban's actions. It will be about whether they follow through on their commitments.
Aid money to the Taliban, to terrorists. The US has gone mad. 20 years we spent in Afghanistan. Young soldiers gave up their life for the cause. It's all been trashed. Global terror is at large once again. And as we come up to the 20th anniversary of 9/11 in just a week's time, instead of us looking back from a position of safety and security, suddenly Islamic terror is re-energized. I spoke about these issues with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's former senior policy advisor, his right-hand woman, Mary Kissel. She's now the Executive Vice President for financial services firm Stevens. Kissel herself was present at the signing of the Taliban agreement, and I asked her why the Trump administration had decided to negotiate with the Taliban in the first place. Mary Kissel, thank you so much for your time. Now, we went into this war to defeat terrorism in the wake of 9/11. How concerned are you now that Afghanistan may become a terror stronghold once again, with both Taliban and ISIS-K putting us all at risk?
Well, the short answer is deeply concerned, Sherry. The Taliban is a terrorist organization. And with the Taliban controlling Kabul and the rest of the country, I think it's safe to say that we have almost exactly the same conditions, if not worse, than the conditions that preceded 9/11. Add on top of that, that you have other terrorist organizations, for instance, ISIS, and you have state actors like the Islamic Republic of Iran, which is harboring al-Qaeda's leadership, and you put that into the mix, plus the groups that are housed in Pakistan, and I think you have a very toxic brew.
I'm interested in whether you would have continued down this course. Secretary Pompeo said Trump wanted to withdraw from January 2017, but the conditions weren't right to withdraw completely. So instead, the US withdrew from 15,000 to 8,600 to 4,500, each time making sure that order could be maintained. Mary, does this mean that if there were signs the Taliban was planning a takeover, you would have kept a presence in Afghanistan?
Well, I think it's important to put this in an even broader context, because you had 3 successive presidents in Bush, Obama, and Trump who all wanted to exit Afghanistan. Of course, under Bush and Obama, there really weren't serious attempts made to figure out if we could draw down these forces in a safe manner. President Trump took on that task, and I worked for Secretary Pompeo. I was his right-hand person, and I can tell you from firsthand experience, worked very, very, very hard to get both of those parties to the table, meaning the Afghan government and the Taliban, but he also talked to the Northern Alliance as well. And so they took on that tough task. And as you note, we were able to draw down troops in a manner that did not endanger either the security of our forces or the stability of the Afghan government. And so, what would have happened in the future? Well, I think, I don't like to hypothesize, but I think you could certainly draw a conclusion that, we were reviewing the conditions on the ground every time there was a drawdown. There was never a rush to the exit. And we were also establishing deterrence. The Taliban knew that if they set a foot wrong, we would hurt them. And the Afghan government knew that if they didn't keep up their end of the bargain, and let's be clear, the Afghan government was a deeply corrupt actor, if they didn't keep up their end of the bargain, that those money flows would go away and there would be consequences.
Biden has blamed President Trump for the catastrophic exit. He says it was Trump's deal with the Taliban that obliged him to pull out. Mary, you were present at the signing of the Taliban agreement. Why was the decision made to negotiate with them at all? And what was it like being in the room with the Taliban when those negotiations were taking place?
Well, let me unpack that a little bit. Remember, it wasn't just an agreement with the Taliban. On the same day that Secretary Pompeo was in Doha, the defense secretary was in Kabul signing an agreement with the Afghan government. And that's a point that I think should be reiterated. It's not getting a lot of mention in the press. It was always made clear from the very beginning to both sides that if the terms of these agreements were not met, this was a conditions based set of arrangements, meaning that the United States would not pull out forces, would not withdraw if either side broke these conditions. And as a result, you had no Americans killed in the last 13 months that the Trump administration was in office. No one in the Trump administration was under any illusions about the nature of the Taliban. They're terrorists, they're bad guys. We knew that. And so we dealt with them in the same way that we dealt with other bad actors, like the Chinese Communist Party, like the Islamic Republic of Iran. We approached all of these nations. North Korea is another one, with shows of force. And so it was made clear from the very beginning that there would be consequences if the other side didn't hold up their end of the bargain. That wasn't unique to Afghanistan. That was the way that we dealt with bad actors the world over.
I'm fascinated to hear you put the Chinese Communist Party in the same basket as the Taliban. While they're both bad actors, do you really think China has become like a terrorist group?
Well, different types of bad actors. The Chinese Communist Party, we declared a genocidal regime that committed crimes against humanity and genocide against the Uyghur Muslims and other Muslim minorities in Xinjiang. And Australia, Britain, many other nations of the free world agreed with us on that, and so did the Biden administration. They reiterated and underlined that finding. So in China, as Australians know well, you're dealing with a totalitarian state that is bent on making the world safer for their form of totalitarianism. It doesn't mean that we couldn't talk to the regime. We did. I was present for some of those conversations too, and it was made very clear to them that we expected a fair and level playing field on issues like trade, that there would be consequences if they decided to steal our intellectual property or undermine international institutions that were very important to us. We just saw a very good example of that with the World Health Organization and the mess that came of the pandemic that was born in Wuhan. The WHO covered that up at China's behest. So yeah, it's a very bad actor, and I think it's important that we link all of these things together. I think you can't think about places, for instance, like Afghanistan in a silo. You have to think about Afghanistan in concert with its neighbors, Iran, Pakistan, China. These guys all talk to each other, and in many circumstances, they share the same strategic goals, which is not good news for the free world.
What does this Afghanistan withdrawal say about Joe Biden's willingness and ability to defend not only America, but its allies as well?
Let's go even further. What about after the Taliban took over Kabul? Well, the President of the United States has every measure of power at his fingertips. He could have flown in new troops. We could have surged in and retaken Bagram Air Force Base, rather. We could have forcibly created a corridor to get our people out. And the president chose not to do that. Why? I think historians will have to figure that out. But I know what the result is. The result is that every bad guy around the world is looking at Washington and not seeing resolve. And many of our allies, Australia included, have every right to look at Washington and worry that the next time that we are challenged by a bad actor, will this president have the nerve to defend American interests? It's a big question mark. And I think for everyone who values their safety and security, it's a deep concern. And by the way, I say this sitting in the middle of New York City. We're about to mark the 20th anniversary of 9/11. And I'll tell you, there are a lot of very nervous people here.
Well, just on Australia, President Biden only just spoke to our Prime Minister Scott Morrison about Afghanistan, and yet Australian forces were standing side by side with America in the fight against terror. The United States also did not give us its vaccines that were expiring in August. We've had to rely on other countries. Does it sadden you to see an American administration appear to walk away from Australia like this?
Well, President Trump didn't exactly start off on the best foot with your former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull either. So we have had, presidents who haven't started off on the right foot with your prime ministers. But I think the question that you're asking is more on the national security front. Can we have confidence that the president will do all of the things that are laid out in the ANZUS Treaty? I would hope so. We really do have no closer partner than Australia. And it is disappointing that the relationship hasn't been prioritized to the degree that I think that we prioritized in the Trump administration, particularly under Secretary Pompeo, where the ties between our two countries were probably closer than they've ever been. But I have hope. These situations don't last forever. We have elections. You have elections. And hopefully after this debacle, there are some people doing some real soul searching in Washington and prioritizing our best friends, because that's really the best way that I can put it. I mean, we are best friends.